In the depths of the world's oceans, invisible and silent, 18 massive submarines patrol with a payload so devastating that any one of them could reshape civilization as we know it. These are the Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines, the largest submarines ever built by the United States Navy, and the most powerful weapons platforms in human history. Each one carries more destructive force than all the bombs dropped in World War II combined. This is the story of how America built the ultimate deterrent, and why these underwater leviathans have kept the nuclear peace for over 4 decades. The year is 1966. The Vietnam War rages with growing intensity. American cities burn with civil unrest. But in the corridors of the Pentagon, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara faces a different kind of crisis, one that threatens not just American cities, but the entire foundation of nuclear deterrence that has prevented World War III. Soviet intelligence reports land on his desk with alarming regularity. The Russians are building something terrifying. The R-36 intercontinental ballistic missile, at 8.8 tons, is the largest missile ever constructed. Its high-yield warheads are accurate enough to destroy America's hardened Minuteman missile silos in their concrete coffins. Worse still, the Soviets are surrounding Moscow with sophisticated anti-ballistic missile defense systems designed to shoot down incoming American ICBMs before they can reach their targets. The calculus of mutually assured destruction is breaking down. If the Soviets can destroy America's land-based missiles in a first strike, and then defend themselves against retaliation, the entire concept of nuclear deterrence collapses. The unthinkable becomes thinkable. McNamara understands that America is facing a potential technological gap that could invite the very nuclear war that deterrence is meant to prevent. He needs answers. More than that, he needs revolutionary solutions. On November 1st, 1966, McNamara commissions a study unlike anything the Defense Department has attempted before. It will be called STRAT-X, Strategic Experimental, and it will be conducted by the Institute for Defense Analyses, an independent non-profit research organization. The mandate is breathtaking in its scope. Examine every conceivable weapons system, offensive or defensive, that could circumvent Soviet capabilities. Ignore political considerations. Ignore bureaucratic turf wars. Ignore conventional thinking. Find weapons systems that will work. The study is headed by General Maxwell Taylor, the legendary commander of the 101st Airborne Division on D-Day, now serving as a strategic thinker for a very different kind of warfare. Under him, Fred Payne leads the working panel. They reach out to major corporations and defense contractors: Boeing, Booz Allen Hamilton, Thiokol, TRW. An advisory committee of military officers provides operational expertise, including Navy Rear Admirals George Miller and Levering Smith, who will prove instrumental in what comes next. If you are enjoying this investigation into history's hidden conflicts, please subscribe to our channel, Cold War Chronicles. We declassify the past to understand the present. For 9 months, the best minds in American defense work in secret. The result is staggering: a 20-volume report examining more than 125 different missile systems. 9 are selected for detailed review as the most promising concepts. Some of the ideas are audacious to the point of seeming insane. One proposal envisions a canal-based system, with missile launching pads mounted on barges that would sail through American waterways, constantly moving to confuse Soviet intelligence. Another concept hides missiles in canisters aboard civilian merchant ships, traveling the world's trade routes, indistinguishable from ordinary cargo vessels. There's even a proposal for an air-launched ICBM that would be dropped from a massive cargo aircraft. But 3 proposals stand out for their potential to survive a Soviet first strike and deliver devastating retaliation. All 3 are sea-based. The ocean, after all, covers 70% of the Earth's surface, providing the ultimate hiding place for weapons that must remain undetected until the moment they are needed. The most revolutionary proposal calls for a dedicated submarine designed specifically to carry ballistic missiles, a boat optimized not for speed or attack capabilities, but for one purpose alone: survivability. This submarine would be slow-moving, designed to hide in the vast emptiness of the ocean, its missiles carried outside the pressure hull to maximize payload. This is the genesis of the Ohio-class submarine. Admiral Hyman Rickover, the father of the nuclear navy and director of the Naval Reactors Office, immediately objects to the slow-speed concept. Rickover has built his career on pushing the boundaries of what nuclear power can achieve underwater. He argues forcefully for a platform capable of high-speed withdrawal after firing a salvo, a submarine that can sprint away from the launch position before enemy forces can converge on the location. The final design will incorporate Rickover's vision. The Ohio class will be built around not one, but a pair of massive nuclear reactors, wrapped in a hull large enough to contain 24 ballistic missiles internally, protected by the submarine's pressure hull. It will be fast, quiet, and deadly beyond measure. The STRAT-X study is later praised by the RAND Corporation in a 2002 report as one of the most influential analyses ever conducted for the United States Department of Defense, an instrument that shaped the nuclear triad for decades and provided a model for strategic thinking that endures to this day. Its most substantial and lasting influence is the Ohio-class submarine program and the Trident ballistic missile system that these boats would carry. Development of the Ohio class begins in earnest in 1968 and 1969, running concurrently with the design of the Trident ballistic missile that these submarines will fire. This is a departure from previous submarine design philosophy. Earlier ballistic missile submarines had been conversions or modifications of attack submarine designs. The Lafayette-class boats of the 1960s, for example, were evolutionary descendants of the first-generation Ethan Allen and George Washington classes, which themselves had been based on the Skipjack-class attack submarine hull. The Ohio class will be purpose-built from the keel up as a strategic deterrent platform. Every design decision revolves around a single question: how do we create a submarine that can hide in the ocean for months at a time, survive any attempt to find and destroy it, and deliver a nuclear counterstrike that will devastate any nation foolish enough to attack the United States? The answer requires solving problems that have never been tackled before. First, the submarine must be large enough to carry 24 ballistic missiles internally. Previous American SSBNs carried 16 missiles. The Ohio class will increase this by 50%, dramatically multiplying the destructive power of each boat. This necessitates a hull far larger than anything previously constructed by the United States Navy. Second, the submarine must remain on patrol for extended periods. The designers settle on a revolutionary two-crew system, with blue and gold crews rotating responsibility for the boat. This allows the Ohio class to conduct patrols lasting 70 to 90 days, with minimal time in port between patrols. When one crew brings the boat home, the other crew takes over after a brief handoff period, and the submarine returns to sea. This dramatically increases the percentage of time each boat spends on patrol, effectively multiplying the size of the fleet. Third, and perhaps most critically, the submarine must be nearly undetectable. Previous SSBNs operated on the assumption that some boats would inevitably be detected and destroyed by improving Soviet attack submarines and anti-submarine warfare forces. The solution was numbers. Build enough submarines that even substantial losses would still leave sufficient boats to deliver a devastating counterstrike. The Ohio class takes a different approach. If the submarine can be made quiet enough, stealthy enough, invisible enough, then numbers become less critical. A smaller fleet of undetectable submarines is more survivable than a larger fleet of boats that can be hunted and killed. Engineers set an ambitious goal: make the Ohio class 1,000 times quieter than the Lafayette class submarines it will replace. 1,000 times. Not 10% quieter, not twice as quiet, but a reduction in acoustic signature so dramatic that it borders on the impossible. The acoustic signature should be reduced to that of biological noise, the sound of fish and marine life moving through the water. In submarine parlance, the Ohio class should sound like a biological contact, not a man-made machine. To achieve this, engineers study British Royal Navy innovations implemented on the Swiftsure-class attack submarines. The British have pioneered intensive rafting of the entire power plant, isolating every piece of machinery from the hull through sophisticated vibration dampening systems. Every pump, every motor, every piece of rotating equipment is mounted on shock absorbers and isolation mounts. The transmission system receives special attention, as the transfer of power from the reactor through the reduction gears to the propeller shaft has traditionally been one of the primary sources of submarine noise. The hull itself will be coated with specialized acoustic tiles that absorb active sonar pings rather than reflecting them back to enemy ships. The exact composition of these tiles remains classified decades later, but their effectiveness is undeniable. During sea trials in 1982, USS Ohio proves so quiet that she becomes effectively undetectable, despite the expectation that fixes and improvements would be needed after initial testing. The submarine exceeds all acoustic performance specifications on her first voyage. More remarkably, the Ohio-class submarines are reported to be just as quiet at 20 knots as the late-model Lafayette-class boats at 6 knots. This is a revolutionary achievement. Previous SSBNs had to creep along at slow speeds to maintain stealth. The Ohio-class can sprint at high speed while remaining virtually silent, giving commanders tactical flexibility that earlier boats could never achieve. The hull construction itself represents an engineering marvel. The submarine will be built from massive sections, each 4 decks tall and 42 feet in diameter. These sections are fabricated at the General Dynamics Electric Boat Facility in Quonset Point, Rhode Island, then transported to the main shipyard in Groton, Connecticut for final assembly. Each section contains fully equipped spaces, crew quarters, machinery rooms, weapons systems, all pre-installed before the sections are joined together. The final dimensions are staggering. The Ohio-class will be 560 feet long, with a beam of 42 feet and a draft of 35.5 feet. Displacement will be 16,764 tons on the surface, swelling to 18,750 tons when submerged. This makes them nearly twice the size of the Lafayette-class boats they replace, and the largest submarines ever built by the United States Navy. Only the Soviet Typhoon-class and Oscar-class submarines will exceed them in size, but the American design philosophy is more conservative, focused on reliability and stealth rather than sheer magnitude. The Ohio-class proves that bigger is not always necessary when the goal is to remain undetected. The power plant at the heart of this leviathan is a masterpiece of nuclear engineering. Initially, designers considered installing 2 reactors, but the final design settles on a single massive SHG pressurized water reactor designed by General Electric. The designation tells the story: S for submarine platform, 8 for the 8th generation core designed by the contractor, G for General Electric as the designer instead of the usual Westinghouse. The SHG reactor is a colossus. It measures 42 feet in diameter and 55 feet long, weighing 2,750 tons by itself. This single reactor can produce 220 megawatts of thermal power, compared to just 11 megawatts for the S5W reactor in previous boats. The power increase is not incremental, it is revolutionary. General Electric's key innovation is natural circulation. The SHG is designed to reach a significant fraction of full power without requiring coolant pumps, which have traditionally been major sources of noise in nuclear submarines. Natural convection moves the coolant through the reactor system, allowing the submarine to operate at speeds up to 20 knots in complete silence. Only when the submarine needs to exceed this speed do the coolant pumps activate, and even then, the noise is dramatically reduced compared to earlier designs. The reactor drives 2 General Electric geared turbines rated for 35,000 shaft horsepower. As backup systems, the submarine carries a single Fairbanks Morse auxiliary diesel engine and a 325 horsepower auxiliary motor. The diesel provides power to all systems when the reactor is cold, while the auxiliary motor guarantees enough power to operate the ballast pumps in an emergency. The power is transmitted to a single shaft driving a 7-bladed propeller. The shape of this propeller is refined through extensive testing and remains classified, as propeller design is one of the most critical factors in submarine acoustic signature. British submarines have already begun adopting pump jet propulsion systems, shrouded propellers that reduce cavitation and noise, but the Ohio class initially stays with conventional propeller design. Pump jets will be adopted in later submarine classes, particularly the Seawolf program. Official performance specifications list the Ohio class as capable of 12 knots surfaced and 20 knots submerged. But these figures are conservative, deliberately understated for security reasons. Many experts estimate that the boats can achieve burst speeds exceeding 30 knots when needed, though such high-speed operations would activate the coolant pumps and increase the acoustic signature. The true capabilities remain classified. Range is limited only by food supplies. With nuclear power, the submarine can remain at sea indefinitely from a propulsion standpoint. In practice, patrols are limited to 90 days, 3 full months, by the capacity of the galley and food storage spaces to sustain a crew of 155 personnel. The submarine can dive to depths exceeding 800 feet as its official test depth, with a crush depth likely well beyond 1,200 feet. These figures, too, are deliberately vague. The true diving capabilities of American nuclear submarines remain among the most closely guarded secrets in the naval warfare, as depth capability directly translates to survivability against enemy weapons. Inside the hull, the arrangement reflects the boat's specialized mission. The massive missile compartment occupies a significant portion of the submarine's length, housing 24 vertical launch tubes arranged in 2 rows of 12. Forward of the missiles, the bow section contains the sonar dome and 4 21-inch torpedo tubes mounted at slight outward angles and staggered to avoid interference. These tubes can fire Mark 48 heavyweight torpedoes, the most advanced anti-submarine and anti-ship weapons in the American arsenal. The living spaces are arranged on 5 decks in the forward section, squeezed into the space between the sonar bay and the missile compartment. The first deck contains the torpedo room, utility spaces, batteries, and the first auxiliary machinery space. The third and fourth decks house the crew quarters for both sailors and officers, along with the galley, mess areas, and recreational facilities. Accommodations are superior to those on earlier submarines, though still cramped by surface ship standards. Privacy is a luxury that does not exist aboard a submarine. The command deck sits directly beneath the sail, separated into distinct spaces. The computer room, integrated radio room, sonar room, command and control center, navigation center, and missile control center. Approximately 50 operators rotate through these spaces, ensuring constant manning of all critical systems. The level of automation is unprecedented, allowing a relatively small crew to operate a vessel of enormous size and complexity. Approximately 1/3 of the submarine's length is occupied by engineering spaces. Moving aft from the living quarters, one passes through a short auxiliary machinery space, then into the reactor compartment itself, which is heavily shielded and normally unmanned during operations. Beyond the reactor lies the main engine room, where the turbines convert thermal energy into mechanical rotation, driving the submarine through the depths. The weapon systems define the Ohio class's reason for existence. The first 8 boats, from USS Ohio through USS Nevada, were initially armed with 24 Trident I C4 submarine-launched ballistic missiles. Development of the Trident I had begun in November 1973 under a program managed by Lockheed. The goal was to create a missile with significantly greater range than the Poseidon C-3 that armed the Lafayette-class boats. The Trident. I was first tested on January 18, 1977, when an unarmed missile, launched from Cape Canaveral, Florida, traveled 4,600 miles to a designated impact point in the South Atlantic Ocean near Ascension Island. The test was a complete success. The missile entered service in 1979 and would remain operational until 2005. Each Trident I missile weighs 73,066 pounds and stands 33 feet tall with a diameter of 71 inches. The two-stage solid-fuel rocket uses thrust vectoring for precise guidance, achieving speeds of 20,000 feet per second, or Mach 18, during the terminal phase of flight. At such velocities, no defense is possible. The missile simply moves too fast for any interceptor to track and engage. The Trident I carries 8 W-76 nuclear warheads, each with a yield of 100 kilotons. These are multiple independently targetable re-entry vehicles, or MAVs, meaning that each missile can strike 8 separate targets. The warheads separate from the missile bus after the boost phase, and each follows its own trajectory to a different aim point. A single Trident missile can devastate 8 cities simultaneously. The missile's range of 4,600 nautical miles allows an Ohio-class submarine operating in international waters off the eastern seaboard of the United States to strike targets west of the Ural Mountains in the Soviet Union. A submarine stationed in the waters near the Aleutian Islands can reach any point in Soviet territory with room to spare. The oceans surrounding the United States become vast firing positions from which American power can reach anywhere on Earth. Beginning with USS Tennessee, the 9th Ohio-class boat, all subsequent submarines are armed with the larger and more capable Trident II D5 missile. The first 8 boats are later refitted to carry the D5 during their mid-life refueling overhauls, a conversion program that runs from 2000 through 2008. The Trident II represents a quantum leap in ballistic missile technology. Development begins in the early 1980s, with the goal of creating a missile accurate enough to destroy hardened targets like enemy missile silos, something that submarine-launched missiles have never been able to accomplish. Land-based ICBMs have always been more accurate than their sea-launched counterparts, but the Trident II changes this equation. The missile is enormous. At 130,000 pounds and 44 feet 6 inches in length, it dwarfs its predecessor. The diameter increases to 6 feet 11 inches, requiring modifications to the missile tubes to accommodate the larger weapon. The Trident II uses a 3-stage solid-fuel rocket motor, with the first and second stages produced by Thiokol and Hercules, and the third stage manufactured by United Technologies. The propellant is NEPI-75, a sophisticated mixture of nitrate ester, plasticized polyethylene glycol-bound HMX, aluminum, and ammonium perchlorate. The operational range exceeds 7,500 miles, though the exact figure remains classified. Top speed during the terminal phase reaches approximately 18,030 miles per hour, or Mach 24. At such velocities, the warhead glows white-hot from atmospheric friction as it plunges toward its target. Nothing can intercept it. Nothing can stop it. The guidance system uses an Mk6 astro-inertial system combined with thrust vectoring through a single movable nozzle actuated by a gas generator. The result is an accuracy measured in hundreds of feet rather than miles. The circular error probable, or CEP, is approximately 100 meters. This means that half of all warheads will land within 100 meters of their aim point. For a nuclear weapon, this is surgical precision. The payload options are diverse and terrifying. The Trident II can carry up to 8 Mk5 re-entry vehicles, each containing a W-88 warhead with a yield of 475 kilotons. Alternatively, it can carry up to 12 Mk4 re-entry vehicles with W-76 warheads at 100 kilotons each, or 12 Mk4A vehicles with the improved W-76-1 at 90 kilotons. More recent developments include the W-76-2, a low-yield tactical warhead of 5 to 7 kilotons designed for limited nuclear options, and the variable-yield W-93 currently in development. The W-88 warhead is the most powerful weapon in the American MIRV inventory. Manufactured briefly at the Rocky Flats plant between 1988 and 1989, only about 400 were produced before the facility ceased operations. The warhead weighs between 175 and 475 kilograms, depending on the specific model, measuring 60 inches long and 18 inches in diameter. It could, theoretically, be fired from the main guns of the Japanese battleship Yamato. if such an absurd comparison helps visualize its size. A single W-88 warhead detonating over New York City would completely flatten Manhattan, with light blast damage extending to Newark and Elizabeth. The thermal radiation burst would cause third-degree burns over an area of approximately 240 square kilometers. One warhead, one city, one moment of unimaginable destruction. Each Ohio-class submarine carries up to 20 Trident II missiles, though this was reduced from 24 in compliance with the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. 4 tubes are permanently sealed in peacetime, though they could be reactivated in the event of war. With 12 warheads per missile and 20 missiles per submarine, each Ohio-class boat carries 240 nuclear warheads. The destructive power of one submarine exceeds the combined explosive force of every bomb dropped during World War II, including both atomic bombs dropped on Japan. Between 1989 and 2020, the Ohio-class submarines conducted 177 successful test flights of the Trident II D5 missile. 10 failures occurred, most recently from HMS Vanguard off the coast of Florida in January 2024. The success rate speaks to the weapon's reliability. When the order comes, if it ever comes, these missiles will fly. The first 4 Ohio-class submarines, USS Ohio, Michigan, Florida, and Georgia, followed a different path. With the end of the Cold War, a 1994 nuclear posture review determined that 18 Ohio-class SSBNs were excessive for America's strategic deterrent needs. 14 boats would provide sufficient capability. Rather than decommission the 4 oldest submarines, the Navy decided to convert them into a completely different type of vessel, the SSGN, or Guided Missile Submarine. The conversion program begins in 2002 and costs approximately $1 billion per vessel in 2008 dollars. 22 of the 24 missile tubes are converted into vertical launch systems for Tomahawk cruise missiles. Each tube can hold 7 Tomahawks, giving these submarines a devastating conventional strike capability of 154 missiles, more firepower than an entire surface battle group. The remaining 2 tubes are converted into swimmer lockout chambers for Special Operations Forces. The submarines can carry up to 66 Navy SEALs or Marine Corps MARSOC operators, along with specialized equipment like the Dry Combat Submersible or Dry Deck Shelter. The boats are equipped with improved communication systems, allowing them to serve as forward clandestine command centers, coordinating multiple special operations missions while maintaining the ability to launch Tomahawk strikes at any moment. USS Florida fired the first shots in anger for any Ohio-class submarine during Operation Odyssey Dawn on March 19, 2011. As part of the international intervention in Libya, Florida launched 93 Tomahawk missiles, 90 of which hit their targets, at Libyan air defense sites. This created the opening for British, French, and American airstrikes to establish a no-fly zone over Libya. It remains the largest single submarine missile strike in history. The Ohio-class submarines entered service beginning with USS Ohio in 1981, just as the Cold War entered its final decade. Over the next 13 years, 17 more boats joined the fleet. They never fired their ballistic missiles in anger. The deterrent worked. The Soviet Union collapsed without triggering nuclear war. The submarines patrolled silently through the depths, unseen and unheard, their mere existence preventing the conflict they were built to fight. Today, 14 Ohio-class SSBNs continue their eternal vigil, ensuring that no nation can launch a nuclear-first strike without facing annihilation in return. They are the guardians of peace through the promise of apocalypse, and they will continue their mission until the Columbia-class submarines begin replacing them in the 2030s. The Ohio-class story is not finished. It endures in the dark waters where these titans still swim, carrying the weight of civilization's survival on their hulls.